Hello my friends, this is Danny Kruger with FCP Euro, and today I'm going to be walking you through everything you need to know about how to service your 722.9 4MATIC transmission on your Mercedes-Benz. All right, so in front of me we have the late model kit for the 722.9 for our 4MATIC today. Late model being the low friction variant of the 722.9 that came later in production. That's going to be the A89 option code. So this is going to be our low friction fluid. We have the Liquimoly. This is part of our kit right here. This is one of our favorites for these units. We have a new seal for our transmission pan, of course, as we are going to be dropping the pan today. Knockout plug, we'll get to that in just a little bit. Drain plug seal. We have new hardware for the transmission pan itself that is single time use. It is stretched to fit. We do have that in the kit, of course, but make sure you don't use the ones coming off the car. We have an attachment for our CTA hand pump to fill the transmission back up. And of course, we have a new filter for our 722.9. This is also for the low friction variant. So with all of the parts in our late model kit right here, let's also talk about some of the tools that we're going to need for this job. All right, so tools for this job. First off, you're definitely going to need a hand pump to fill up the transmission. This is CTA Tools 7400. To hook that into the pan, we have CTA Tools 7415. This is the fill adapter. You're going to need that regardless of whether you're using this guy or another hand pump. We also have CTA Tools 2476 to get at some of the tighter bolts, the E10 bolts at the back of the transmission pan. Alternatively, if you have an E10 socket that's small profile with a wobble, you should be able to get it done. Or if you have one of these guys, which is also awesome, this is an E10 ratcheting wrench, also great. 3/8 drive ratchet or 1/4 inch, depending on what size sockets you're using, those will do the job as well. We also have a battery powered one just to make things a little bit quicker. You're definitely going to need a scan tool that is fluent in Mercedes-Benz. We're using the Autel MX808 here. That's going to tell you your transmission temperature as you're getting everything up to operating temperature. So for sockets, you're going to need a 6mm hex, an 8mm, your standard socket, and then also another E10, just to make sure you're getting in there. I like to keep a couple extensions around for this one, depending on whatever size ratchet, 3/8, 1/4 drive, just good to have them. Definitely going to need a 3/8 torque wrench. If you have a 1/4 inch torque wrench capable of really small increments, it'll help you, but otherwise we can just use feel on this one and that'll get it done. Some really nice to haves on this one because it can be very messy. Going to be brake clean, some paper towels to clean up your mess. I'm definitely going to recommend some rubber gloves. One flathead screwdriver or something else long that you don't really care about. We're going to need to use that to stick up inside the drain plug. It's going to get covered in transmission fluid, but that's okay as long as we don't care about it too much. And then you're definitely going to need a catch basin of sorts to drain all of the fluid into. So now that we have all of our tools, let's hop straight into the DIY. All right, so first thing we're going to have to do is remove the front and then rear section of the belly pan to access our transmission. Just to clarify for you guys, this is going to be more or less the same whether you're working on a 4MATIC or rear-wheel drive, as well as A89, the late model or the early model. That being said, we do already have a DIY for the early rear-wheel drive model. That's going to be Kyle working on the CLK55. So feel free to find that one if that's easier for you. But with that being said, we're going to zip out all these 8mm and we will drop these pans down and get going from there. All right, so we have the front section of the belly pan off. Only reason we're taking that one off is to access this rear section here. So we're going to zip off the rest of the 8mm screws, and then we'll have access to our transmission pan. So we're just going to zip off this E10 bolt right here that holds the heat shield on, and then it'll basically just pull straight down. It kind of clips in up at the top. So that just gives us a little bit more access. Then we're going to walk our way around the pan and basically tuck the wiring loom out of the way. So we'll hop over to the other side of the car where it's a little easier to see. And it basically just kind of has little metal tabs that you pull straight off of the side of the transmission. For our clips for our loom today, you're going to see one here and one here. They basically just slide onto the pan. So you can take a flathead and just kind of coax them on down. They'll unclip and then you can tuck your wiring loom right out of the way. All right, in our instance, these zip ties are incredibly brittle because this one hasn't had a service maybe in a while. So it actually just popped out. We'll just get new zip ties for it. But for you, if you want to just take a look, you can actually just pry these straight down. They'll pop off the pan and then you can tuck them out of the way. We also, for ours right here, have the connector, the electrical plug. So you're just going to squeeze the tabs inwards and pull out. If it's fighting you, try squeezing them in, push towards the back of the car and then pull out and it'll probably be a lot easier. we have our harness mostly tucked out of the way here. Now we're going to have the 6 transmission pan bolts going around. We are going to want to keep mindful of these dowels that align the pan and where they go on the pan as we're taking them off. So if you'd want to maybe take a cardboard stencil so that you know which one's the front left, which one's the middle left, that type of thing, now would be a great time because we're going to start taking those off in just a second. But first, we have the pleasure of draining our 7G-Tronic. All right, so our drain plug is going to be a 6mm hex. I encourage you to take your time with this. Better to do that. If it's nice and rusty around the lip like ours is, then round it off and have to fight with it. So, of course, this is where it has a chance to get pretty messy for us. So get your drain pan ready, and then we're just going to knock this guy out. And that will get our transmission draining. Just going to zip this guy off. All right, and let that drain. All right, so we have all of our blue fluid drained out. Of course, that is that low friction variant, the blue stuff. If you have the earlier model, it'll be red. Ours was barely blue anymore. It was pretty dark. So just when you think it is done draining, it is not. We have to remove the overflow plug that goes on top inside of the pan. So Mercedes recommends a drift. I'm just going to use an old and unloved screwdriver. Just going to stick it up inside and pop. So now it is just loose in the pan, which allows the rest to actually drain down. So we're going to let this drain again, and then we can go from there. All right, so last little bit of our fluids dripping out. What I'm actually going to do now is throw our old drain plug back in to stop myself from getting covered when we do drop this pan down. Doesn't need to be super tight, just snug so that it stops dripping. And then what we're now going to do before we actually pull the pan down is clean the entire thing. Obviously, contaminants are going to be the biggest hazard to a transmission. So now is a great time to get all of the dust and road grime off around the pan and then the lip of the pan at the bottom of the transmission itself. So grab some brake clean, clean rag, and clean everything up. So I'm going to start at the bolt that I think is going to give us the most misery here, which is going to be the rear one on the passenger side. As you can see, it's pretty tight with the transmission here. At home, I definitely recommend you use a 3/8 or 1/4 inch wobble socket. That should allow you access to this rear bolt. Of course, either 3/8 or 1/4, depending on what size your e-torque sockets are. We have a ratcheting E10 wrench right here that I'm actually going to sneak in from the back, which is another way to do it, of course. Honestly, it's the least efficient one, but that's fine. And I'm just going to work this off 1/4 turn at a time until this guy's fully undone. And then as I kind of touched on earlier, the dowels that actually hold the pan on, these big metal chunks right at the front under each bolt, keep track of where those guys go because you want to put them back in the same spots. All right, so I'm going to use the same wrench. You can use your wobble on the other rear one. I'm going to take that guy out as well. All right, then I strongly recommend after you've got the rear two out, move to the front two so that way we'll have the two middle ones to keep everything level when we're doing the actual pan drop, which is definitely the messiest part of this job. So back to the E10 again, and we're going to take these other guys off. I'm just going to crack them both loose, and then I'll use the power tool to actually zip them right out. All right, so I've cracked the middle two loose. This is where things are probably going to get messy. The second this pan starts to actually come down is when you're going to get fluid leaking all over the place. So what I like to do, get one of them all the way out, or most of the way out, and then hold brace with my hand so that I can guide it down myself at my own speed. So now's a good time if you want to cover the floor or wherever you're working to get situated. All right, and now I'm going to try to just guide this straight down pretty quickly so that we don't make too much of a mess. All right, and then we will set our pan out of the way. We're gonna have to clean that guy up before we put it back in the car. All right, and while we're in here, we're going to actually pull the filter out as well, because of course we're replacing that today. So you just kind of grab it and pull straight down, and the O-ring will unseat. All right, now we're going to let that drain. That's going to get all the last of the fluid out of our actual 7G-Tronic transmission. All right, so we are now on the bench with our pan. We're going to clean things up, but we're also going to quickly just look through this pan and kind of get an idea of what we're messing with here. So if we had this still in the car, you could imagine that this being your filter, would kind of be stuck up into the valve body. It would be filtering the fluid coming through this pan. Of course, we are replacing this guy today, but I did want to show you guys, this guy has a fair amount of metallic debris on it. There is kind of an expected amount of material you would have in there just from normal operation. I'll show you guys the magnet here in a second. Our transmission is very much within Mercedes spec, but do expect at least just a little bit of a fine granular bit of metal. You can look up pictures online and we'll probably have one here for you of the Mercedes expected amount and then also the amount that you should be concerned with when you do find metal on that magnet. So I'm going to toss this filter. And then we move down into the pan here. Of course, this is very dirty still, but we do have the overflow plug. So this guy just pops straight off. This is that bit that we knocked out with the screwdriver to get the extra bit of fluid. So that is also going to get tossed. If you do have an early model of the transmission, your overflow plug that is coming out as well as your replacement one will actually be clear or white. That is kind of a way to tell the two of them apart, as well as the amount of dimples in the pan. Again, if you need help telling those units apart, we have that blog post down in the description below. Another thing to keep in mind that's kind of interesting is if you do have an early model, you can use parts from the late model chassis to retrofit the deeper pan, the smart media filter, all of which can actually help to increase the longevity of your early model 7229. So we also have a kit for that. That'll be in the description as well to retrofit all of this equipment onto your older model. Of course, you still will use the old fluid though, as that's what your transmission's rated for. So going to pull the old seal off the pan here. This one is actually very brittle. Again, indicating that maybe this guy has never had a service before. But we just pull that right around the edge. And we got a brand new one in our kit, so we can toss that as well. Now, I like to grab just a clean rag or towel or something of that sort. We're going to just pull the singular magnet up off the pan. And then you can just kind of rub it around to gauge. So as you can see, there's a fair amount of debris in here. But again, this is a finer amount of accrued metal over time. When it looks more like a spiky or a sea urchin or something of that sort, that's when you're generally going to want to be concerned. So I'm just going to clean this guy up. Going to wipe down the inside of the pan, and then we'll get to putting on the new seal as well as the new overflow plug. All right, so we have everything cleaned up here. Going to put my magnet back in, just exactly in the same spot. Keep things nice and easy. Overflow plug, super easy. Just goes back right where the drain plug is and snaps on with a little bit of force. Go grab my seal, and that again is just going to pop on. You can actually use, there's little triangles on the gasket, the seal itself, that are meant to tuck into the little eyelets on the front and the sides of the pan. Can help to kind of orient things, but it's only going to fit one way anyways, so super easy. All right, so just lay it on, tuck it down, and then you can go ahead and there's on the seal itself, I'll actually show you, there's a little like alignment type dowel to lock it into these tabs. So it keeps things nice and easy. And if you were with us for our 7226 service as well, this one generally is going to be a little more straightforward to fill and bleed as well, which we love. All right, so this guy is all set and ready to go back in the car once we put our filter in. The last thing I want to do is actually head back over to the bottom of the transmission and clean up the mating surface, which is where this is all going to be sealing to again. Of course, again, primary thing with any automatic transmission, keep that fluid clean. We don't want any debris in there. All right, so what we're talking about here when we say sealing surface, it's pretty clear cut. It's going to be basically the only part that's still silver and not covered in grime around the lip of the bottom of the transmission going around. This is the valve body, of course, in the center. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of brake clean so I can rather precisely wipe down the surface here and just go around the edge. Just clean things up nice and easy. And we're just going to do that around the whole rim of the bottom of the transmission. And then we will be able to install our filter and button the pan back up. So we have our replacement smart media filter here. Going to just slide directly, and it's got an O-ring to actually just lock itself in. You just push it up. What I am going to do, and what I recommend you do, is grab some of your new fluid. I'm going to use our liquid moly here. It comes in the kit. Just dab a little teeny bit onto a gloved finger or something like that. Run it around the O-ring. It's going to make it way easier to push in, and it's going to protect it from getting damaged. All right, and then you'll see you can just kind of guide that in there press, and you'll hear it and kind of feel it sink. Boom. That's simple. All right, so that's our filter in. Now we can grab our pan, grab a couple of bolts, and I recommend doing these two side ones once you get it up there. Again, a friendly reminder, use the hardware in the kit for this part. You're not going to want to reuse those bolts. You're at risk of snapping them. All right, so we will tuck our pan up and away. All right, that'll be enough to hold it up there for us. And then I'll grab the other ones. I'm going to go across, just hand threading, and then I'll probably go corner across, and then we'll actually start torquing everything down. So we have those all finger tight. The torque spec on these from Mercedes, these are again the E10s going around the pan, going to be 4 Newton meters plus 180 degrees. So if you do have something that can measure in increments that small, of course use it. Alternatively, 4 Newton meters is just barely snug. So I'm going to take this ratchet, I'm holding it kind of choked up here because that way I can mitigate the amount of torque I'm applying. And I'm just gonna snug it up. Don't need to go crazy. Again, these are stretch bolts, so you don't wanna snap them. And I'm going to go in that same type of cross pattern that I was showing you I was doing by hand before. And then I'll go up the front here just to make sure we're evenly distributing pressure. All right, so we have all of those snugged up to effectively hand tight. I'm gonna go back around, just give it a quick check to make sure now that we have everything locked in with even pressure, it's all good. And then from there, we're actually going to take the drain plug back out. Of course, we are replacing the seal on it, but first we're going to have to use our special CTA fill tool to get fluid back inside this guy. Right, now we're just going to grab our hex again, crack this guy back out. Might get a little fluid dripping out if you had anything still running off the valve body, but we should be pretty clean at this point. And then we get to start our lovely Mercedes fill procedure. So now will be the time after you get the drain plug out to grab your OBD2 scanner. You're going to need that to check temperature of the internals of the transmission, and then also to grab a fluid pump as well as your CTA adapter. All right, before we get too carried away with the fill process here, I am going to throw our bracket back on, which just clips into place. And then you're going to have the E10, and you can just snug that guy up. It doesn't need to be too tight. Just throw the tool on it, zap it in if you're using a power tool, or just give it a quick hand tight with your ratchet. All right, that's the heat shield back on there. And then of course you can tuck your wiring loom out of the way. As mentioned earlier, we're gonna need new zip ties, so I'm going to skip straight to the fill process. So a vital part of this service is going to be our CTA 7415. And what that is it's an adapter for this pan specifically that will then basically tucks straight up in here inside of that overflow plug, and then you can use a hand pump. We use our CTA pump that you can also find down in the description. Pump the fluid in, and that's going to basically allow you to then burp it out afterwards once we have the vehicle running. So I'm going to grab this attachment, the CTA tool. All right, so this guy, you're going to use the threaded end and just screw it into the pan. Super easy. And you're going to want that like roughly flush just so it doesn't come spitting back out at you when you go to pump the fluid in. And then this guy, our CTA pump, just pops right up on there, and then you can cinch it down with the collar. And then we are sealed. So we have our CTA tools adapter hooked up to our CTA hand pump here. I'm going to add about 4 liters of our liquid moly fluid into this guy. Going to add pressure until it's around 10, 12 PSI roughly on the gauge in front. Open the valve, and then we're going to get our full 4 liters up in there. The car has not been started yet. Once we get those 4 liters in there, we'll actually get it running. We're going to get it up to 45 degrees Celsius on our Autel scanner, which will show us the internal trans temp. And then once it's at 45, we're going to pull this guy off and assess. We may add about a ½ liter at a time as it's idling up to temp, depending on how much is flowing out. You'll see more on that in a minute. All right, so we have everything all cinched down. Ball valve is closed so I can add pressure. Like I said, we're just going to pump until we've got about 10, 12 PSI, nothing crazy, just enough to push the fluid up inside. All right, just about good. I'm gonna let this guy rip. Boom. I'm going to give it that full 4 liters. We'll then pull this guy out. And of course, as we know, when fluids get warm, they'll expand. So once we get this running, it's actually all going to kind of, we'll have more in there than we do at the moment when it's cold. What I will do though is pull this out. If there's a little bit of a stream coming out, we're probably in a good spot. But realistically, what I'm going to do, add this 4 liters. And then as the car is warming up, add in a half liter every 15 or so degrees Celsius. Once we get up to 45, we'll pull it out and we'll actually do our proper fluid level check to see if it adds more. All right, so 4 liters in there. We're going to just pull this straight down because it's just an interlocking seal on our adapter here. And we're not expecting to see much come out. Oop. Okay, so we might have overfilled that a little bit. Of course, it's going to expand once it's up to temperature, but I'm actually going to plug this guy back in so that we are closed off, get it up to temperature, let it actually circulate. We did have the filter out of this thing, letting it drain for a long time, and cycle the gears once it gets a little bit of temperature in it. See if when we pull that off again, if it's coming out at that same rate. It might indicate there's a little bit too much in there, but we're not going to hurt it when it's just idling. All right, so a little bit noisy down here. We do have the vehicle running now. I have my Autel hooked up over here, which is allowing me to monitor the internal temperature of the transmission. We're currently at 25 degrees Celsius indicated. I'm going to let it get up another 5 or so, cycle the gears, park, reverse, neutral, drive, park, reverse, neutral, drive repeatedly, just to cycle everything around. And then I'll probably throw another half liter at it, see if it likes it. And then from there, we're going to wait to that 45 degree operating temperature. And basically what we're going to do at that point, pull this guy off like I did earlier. And what we're looking for is a slightly broken flow in the transmission fluid. So if it's coming out in a continuous stream, there's actually too much. This is of course when we are at that operating temperature. So what we want is for it to be almost a dotted stream coming down. That'll indicate that this thing is full and good to go. At that point, we will unscrew the adapter and throw the drain plug in. But in the meantime, I'm just going to sit here and wait patiently for it to crawl up to temperature. So I preemptively have my other full liter in there. Probably only going to need half of that, I guess, to top that off, if even that. But it's in there now. I'll repressurize this back to the 10 to 12 PSI and just keep an eye on our temperature as we're waiting for this to come up. So we're at about 35 degrees Celsius, which is 10 below where we're going to be checking for operating temperature. But what we can now do is start cycling the gears, let some of that fluid move through. So just plant your foot on the brake, very simple. And then we're just going, we're in park right now. Cycle to neutral, reverse. Still have my foot on the brake, of course. Drive, neutral, park, and just do that a couple of times. And then you're going to put it back into park, foot off the brake, climb back underneath the car, and that's where we're going to check for our fluid level, but we're just trying to move things around, of course. So do that a couple more times, and then we'll meet back down under the car. Cool. All right, so we're at 44 degrees indicated, which is just 1 degree Celsius off of where we're supposed to be on this thing. What I'm going to do is our first real fluid check. I added a little bit before just to make sure there was fluid in there, but what I'm going to do is pull this down off the adapter, watch the stream that's coming out. So if it's a steady stream, we have a little bit too much in there. We want to go until it's just kind of like rapidly dripping out. If it's not dripping at all or is dripping very slowly, we're actually going to add a little bit and then we'll unscrew our adapter and screw the drain plug in. Reminder, we have that overflow plug in there. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to get the level of the fluid right up so it's just a little above the top of that. So even when we unscrew this guy, it's not going to come dumping out, it's just going to keep dripping at the same rate. So without further ado, pull this guy down. All right, that's actually a little too slow. I'm going to add probably another half liter, which is a little ambitious, but I'll let it barf out whatever it doesn't want. We'll see how much it takes. So open this up. All right, we'll try that again. All right, it wants a little bit more than that even. So basically just keep doing this process and I will show you what the stream looks like momentarily when this thing's ready to go. As you can see, this can get a little bit messy here, but it's just part of the job. We are at operating temperature now. All right. So it wants even a little more steady than that as per Mercedes. So we have put in a total of 5 liters right now. I'm gonna add another liter to our CTA Tools kit here, and then we'll check back in. So we got another liter in this guy. Just gonna get some pressure back in our tank here. Flip the ball valve, give it a little bit more, and then, like we said before, just kind of let it puke out whatever it's not gonna take. And just as kind of an indicator of what's happening, anything that it is barfing back out is just extra fluid above that overflow plug. So this is kind of how you set the level on these guys. Boom, and then pull it off. All right, so that's much more steady. So we're going to let that become kind of a dotted flow. And then once it is kind of broken and rapidly dripping like drops, we're gonna unscrew this guy and throw the drain plug straight in. Like that is what we're talking about. And throw our drain plug right back in. We of course have our new seal on here that comes in the kit. That is just about tight. And then the torque spec on this guy is going to be 22 Newton meters. All right. All right, so drain plug is now torqued. I'm going to clean up just around here. As you saw, it got a little messy there at the end, just around the bottom of the pan, get everything nice. We're going to grab those 8mm screws and then throw the belly pans back on, drop the car down, and then we will go for our test drive. But for the most part, that's going to wrap up our 722.9 4MATIC service on a late model 7-speed auto Mercedes. All right, we're gonna tuck our belly pan back on. We're gonna do the rear one first. So that's the rear pan. Just as a little bit of a tip, if yours looks the way ours does underneath the engine, now would be a great time to hit some brake clean everything up since we're under here. And that way in like a couple 100 miles, you can crawl back under and check, and it might be a lot easier to tell where this is leaking from. Right now, with air pulling underneath the car, we have no idea where all this oil is coming from. So I'm gonna do that as well, and then throw the belly pan back on. All right, front belly pan going back on. All right, so that is going to conclude our late model 722.9 4MATIC service. Pretty similar to the early model. You will have a little bit of a fluid variance just because this does have that deeper pan for the smart media filter. I definitely encourage you, if you do have one of those early models, check out our retrofit kit with the later model filter and pan, because they will help the lifespan of your unit. But overall, really a fairly straightforward service, especially if you have the right tools. Ours ended up taking about 5.5 liters of the liquid moly fluid to refill. Of course, if you're doing the torque converter, it's going to take a little bit more than that, or yours might take a little bit less depending on how long it was dripping for. So don't be afraid to let it kind of drip back out as we were letting things purge. It's just part of the process. It's a messy one, but ultimately it's going to be a really good service to prolong the life of your 7-speed automatic and keep your vehicle on the road with really no worries. So if you like this video, feel free to like or subscribe. Also, why don't you drop us a comment down below and let us know how many pairs of rubber gloves you went through. I think my final tally on this one was a pair count of 7, which I'm a little embarrassed of, but we have to take some pauses here. So, of course, stay tuned for the next one. We have plenty of Mercedes and other European-made content coming your way very soon.